All right. I want to talk about depression because, in my experience, depression in a few ways is really similar to alcoholism, but in the central way that is similar to alcoholism is in my experience, it really roots itself in self-centeredness, which if you read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous or the big book of a bunch of programs, the main issue essentially is self-centeredness. Specifically, I guess I'll just speak from Alcoholics Anonymous because that's the program I know, and that 12-step program. Yeah. So the home that depression lived in for me was self-centeredness. And depression is also similar to alcoholism in the way that I found that really bad depression was sort of like a blackout, where it was sort of like completely all encompassing. So the only thing that I'm thinking about at that time is how depressed I am, and I can't seemingly get out of that. And it was similar to like when I would experience blackouts. Yeah, it's like I'm there now and I can't fucking move from it, which is the claustrophobia of like extreme self-centeredness. I think that's why suicide becomes so prevalent, is because it doesn't seem like there's a way out. And self-centeredness just in general, without the alcoholism or the depression or whatever, is still quite claustrophobic because it takes what we are. Self, small s self, doesn't have any life. It does not have any reality. Yeah, it takes reality from what we are and then supposes or presupposes, as Ramana Maharshi would say, that it is real or that it has reality. Yeah, but that's not actually the case. What it's doing is taking reality from what we are and trying to presuppose it that it's real. And in doing that, it only thinks about itself. Like Wei Wu Wei says, 99% of your thoughts are about a you that doesn't exist. Yeah, so that's just regular self-centeredness. But for the addict, or for, in my experience, having depression the way that I did, it was that type of self-centeredness, but like that was also drinking, you know? So it was like super self-centeredness. It's really hard to get out of, so there's only a few ways seemingly to get out of it. Yeah, one of those is to kill yourself, which was very like appealing to me on many levels at many times in my life. So this self-centeredness, yeah, is also one of the main reasons that I went drinking, was to try to get relief from that self-centeredness. So it manifested as depression, and then on the other side of it, it manifested as everything was my fault. So I would like try to work super hard and do everything really perfect, and then when that didn't work, I would go drink. Or if I needed relief from that, I would go drink. But the thing is that whole thing is super self-centered. Do you see, like the whole anatomy of what's going on is based on self-centeredness. And this is why this non-dual message brings so much relief from that, because it cuts the legs right off of self-centeredness. Yeah. And how it does that is it inquires into the existence of self. Rather than messing with depression and the thoughts and the thought patterns, which go on and on forever and just seemingly keep changing. Yeah, it's like this thing self, this feeling of being an independent thing, a separate thing, keeps manifesting in all these ways. So it was like everything's my fault, so now I got to work super hard in life to make everything perfect and to make everybody happy and satisfy everybody. I felt everything was my fault from pretty much as long as I can remember. Yeah, I would always wear a hat in school. I remember it, so people like I could have that hat on, so that people couldn't really see me, because it's just so self-centered, man. It's so fucking claustrophobic. Oh my God. So drinking would like break it. It's like I could stop caring for a little bit, at least a few days, however long a binge would go, whatever's going on with the booze. But anyways, the root of it is this self-centeredness. And depression is like a disease, in my view, in that there's this mental system which arises, and within that mental system is this thing called depression. The same way that within the mental system, it's like alcoholism needs somewhere to land, and it lands on the mental system. It lands on this idea of self and being this independent self. And depression does the same fucking thing. And both of those diseases talk to you as you. And this is really the issue. Because it's seemingly that the head is talking to you as you, about you, and that circle you can't get out of. Yeah, so it gets very uncomfortable. And the thing that gives it all the meaning, like we said, it doesn't have there's no reality to those thoughts until it's given reality. And the thing that's giving it reality is the idea that it's arising to an I, to me. Yeah. Now those thoughts have already presupposed that that's true. That those thoughts are arising to you, and you are seen as a body. Yeah, the head translates or speaks to the body of which it's a part. So it's really important to see this, man, because it's like, this is what cracks the cycle, is that these thought patterns, this mental system, which alcoholism is living in, or depression is living in, and is speaking to you as you, in your voice seemingly, yeah, it's not arising to a you. It's arising, but it's not arising to a you. But when you're living as that, you're giving it all the life it has. So the depression is really taken hold. You're not having thoughts. Now thoughts are having you, and depression is moving you around sort of like a chess piece, however it wants. Yeah. Through the mechanism of the mental system. Because there's a claiming that you're identified with the mental system. I lived my life like that for a long time. And it really fucking killed me. The only thing that would seemingly give me relief from it was alcoholism. But then alcoholism came with its own bunch of controls. So it's like two different hands are now controlling me. Yeah. And then everything's my fault and I need to be perfect at everything. So now there's a third hand. And all these hands don't make sense. Yeah, because they also don't have any meaning. It's just like mental patterns running and running and running. Yeah. This is why the message of non-duality is so important. Because it cuts the root right off, right away. Rather than messing with the thought patterns. Yeah, or trying to morph them into some really beautiful thought pattern, or like, I'm just going to completely alleviate the programming of the thoughts, which never worked for me in the first place. It cuts the root off. Who does it arise to? You see? It cuts the identification and the ownership of what's happening off. And then in my experience, they soften and they slow down real quick, because we're giving it the life by putting belief in that mental system. And a lot of belief in that mental system is arising to me. Yeah? So the self-centeredness is of self. Self and its thoughts are centered on itself. And it's presupposing, it's already has a suggestion that it is you that is doing that. And whose it's arising to. Yeah. Now the doership of it is really important. Because if there's a thought that comes up and that thought is presupposed to arise to you, then there's a feeling that you're doing that thought. Even though it arises and then it's claimed by the head after it has arisen. You see? The head has it the other way, that you've already done it. Which is a real fucking hole, especially in depression, because then it's a feeling that, or an idea that you're doing depression. You're being done to by depression by putting faith in the vessel in which depression is riding on, which is self. Yeah. You're not doing depression. What you are cannot be depressed. Awareness cannot be depressed, you know? It's from awareness that puts belief into the system which is holding or housing depression. Why is it housing depression? For me, it was because of that self-centeredness. Everything is my fault, and things aren't going the way that my head wants them to go. And it's my fault. So yet again, I'm a piece of shit. You see? That's the program. That's the program that's going. It doesn't see anybody else's role. It doesn't even see outside of itself. It's just thinking about itself, or what it's doing, or what's being done to it, essentially, in relation. to other things. This is the crux, man, and the center of it is that I, that self. To see who that arises to. Because if I go mess with the depressive thoughts and try to alter them, it's just never worked out for me. It just wasn't it wasn't a good groove for me to be in. Because they keep changing and they keep morphing. And it's just another fucking thing for me to fail at. Yeah, for the head to go, yeah, you did that bad too, and now you can't do this and whatever. And that's just a mess. It's not, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But the inquiry works because it's true. There is no base of you where all those thoughts land. Yeah? Which means you can be free from the system, the program system, and then be free of what that system holds, which is the depression. Yeah? Because this is this bondage of self. We feel when we're bondage of self. You can't be bonded to self because self isn't a thing, it's a movement. It's like energy moving, it's like the wind, yeah. It's a bunch of ideas culminating to suggest thingness that doesn't exist. A bunch of movements saying there's a still rock in the middle of that, and there's not. There's not that there, you see. But it's being that rock that has us stuck. Whether it be alcoholism or depression, or whatever's going on. And that's really the crux of the steps, I feel. Step one is that powerlessness, which is right away, self is powerless. Yeah. It's a powerless system, and it's trying to put power on things. This is the thing. The head is trying to control everything. Whether it uses depression to do that, or alcoholism, or manipulation, or whatever the fuck it's going to use, it's trying to control life and manipulate life, and it can't do it. It's powerless over that. Yeah, but it's trying to gain power, and it's using you to do it. So seemingly when it can't gain power, it seems like you're failing, which is one of the real cruxes of step one. When you go into recovery, people say you're powerless. Yeah, and it's a friggin' hurdle for a lot of people to get over. It's one of the blessings of really hard depression or alcoholism, is that powerlessness is so obvious in that case, because the head just keeps fucking failing. So you give up, essentially. You say you're powerless. Yeah. And then what the steps bring about, is step 2 and 3 is turning to that higher power. Come to believe in the higher power, yeah? Or that higher power will return me to sanity. Because if I'm going to give up the powerlessness to self, I got to land in something. So you land in a higher power. And then as you go through the working steps, it just unveils how self has not been reliable, essentially how it's been running you around. Yeah, and why it's programmed in the way it is. And then self-reliance moves. Yeah. And you continue to sit back in the higher power. So it starts, you give the higher power a meaning to start. You find a higher power that works for you. And then by the time you move through the steps, the higher power is showing you what it is. It's revealing itself to you. By what? Removing focus on self-centeredness, on self. Removing our belief in self-centeredness. That was caused so much drinking for me. All the drinking and all the depression was based in self-centeredness. And really this friggin' core belief that everything's my fault. That everything that's happened is my fault. That I didn't do good enough, or I should have done this, or I shouldn't have done this. It's just back and forth with this self shit. Because that's how it's seeing in a dualistic place. So Advaita's looking right at that. You're not that. You're not that. You're before that. Not as a thing, or as a perceived thing, as an idea, which is what self is kind of presenting itself as. Yeah. And then there's freedom, now, from that. Yeah, it's not something to become. It's like Ramana being ourselves reality. It's being ourselves reality. not doing. It's not like trying to untangle all of the depressive thoughts and things. No, no, no. It's looking at the source. It's looking at the exact nature of the wrong. Identification as self. That is the bondage of self. The bonding agent is identification as the one who self arises to. Yes. You are not that. You see through that bondage by seeing that you're not the I that it arises to. And then the depression is not fueled. The alcoholism is not fueled. And then from the back, walking in the back door of the house like that, you can really see the interior. Because it's not now also personal. It's no longer your fault, but you're seeing self and it's all of its glory. Yeah. And you see that that self is very limited. That the mental system is quite limited. You know, for one, it's limited to time and space. And depression really, in my experience, plays with time a lot, man, because it's like saying what I didn't do, which caused me to not be where I'm at now, or where I want to be at now, you see? And it's my fault. Which therefore means that everything that's coming is not going to work out, because I can only see the past, as the Course says. So the head only sees the past. So it's projecting into the future that it's also going to be shit. Yeah. So why move either direction, you know? And it's saying you're a piece of shit now. It's making this story up now. And it gets super claustrophobic if you're identified as that story. You seemingly can't get out of it. Yeah, and your options get limited, more limited as the self-centeredness gets more self-centered. Because the more I dive into depression, the more I dive into the self-centeredness, and then I get more and more claustrophobic. Yes. Yeah. It's like being in a room full of doors, and the doors start disappearing one at a time, you know? And then there's seemingly less ways to get out. The crux is you're not in it in the first place. Yeah. That's the answer. You're not in it. It might be arising, but it's not arising to you. You don't own what's arising. That's the real kicker. Because also with depression, it's like in recovery, like I went to sobriety and then I went right into spiritual practice. Spirituality. Now I'm going to be that thing, a yoga teacher or whatever, yeah? And now self has grabbed onto that and I'm fucking judging every other yoga teacher. It's just like on and on and on. It's claiming ownership of it and using now that vessel to run its course the same way it used depression or alcoholism. It's just an addiction, you know, arising in spiritual practice. In order for everything not to be my fault, I have to be the best, which means you have to be the worst. So now the head is judging everybody else. Yeah. That only ever ends with me going home alone and being, why am I such a piece of shit, judging all the time? Self, 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 self. And self just keeps presenting all of this. Yeah, until we see, maybe you're not that. Maybe there's a programming going on and you're not that programming. Maybe you can be free from it, like right now. And then that claustrophobic room, you see, isn't a room. It's like the prison of self that they talk about. Yeah, that prison is only being made by putting faith in self. If we believe that that self, that mental process is arising to you, yeah, then there's a prison. It's like the openness of awareness now is within a stadium, and that stadium gets smaller and smaller and smaller. It contracts, literally your body contracts, yeah? Really, when I was really depressed, I would get super cold. My body would shake and all this shit. It's like this super, super claustrophobic self-centeredness. Man. This is why this inquiry stuff is important, because I also tried these meditation practices or whatever of like trying to figure it all out, man. And that is more focus on the thing that's killing you. It's just not it. It's just not it. That's what I saw in when I got into AA and really got into like spirituality. Is that became super self-centered because now I'm trying to get out, yeah, which is only reifying my inness of self. Yeah. It's like trying to wiggle your way out is just reinforcing all the time that you're in. Yeah, that you are self and that you need to get out of self. And it's the whole thing is imaginary, you know. It's like you can't grab it, you can't move it. It's an imaginary place, this claustrophobic self. Yeah. It definitely doesn't seem imaginary. It doesn't feel imaginary when you're way in the depths of it, for sure. Yeah. But it doesn't change the fact that you're not it. And it manifests in all these different ways. The head claims what it comes in contact with and makes it a self-centered endeavor. Teaching yoga became that, meditation became that. And if there's a me, then there's a hard you, and that's going to get judged, and it's just going to create more and more separation, duality, 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 me. It's the head. This is the head doing this. Yeah. What you are is not of that self-centeredness. But you see that self-centeredness arise from what you are. That's why negation is so important. And that's why negation is like critical. Because you see it arise. What is being perceived is not the perceiver. And yet you are what you're already looking for. Yeah. You are already the thing that you're looking for. So when something goes looking, like trying to get out of a mental system, that ain't you. Because you are what you're looking for. Being ourselves reality. Being ourselves reality. If we move the belief away from self-centeredness, we can only land there. Where we've never left. It's always been that way. It's kind of like, that's what arises, yeah. It's like awareness or whatever, God, space, whatever you want to say, it's always there as something to sit right into. And that's really the relief. The relief isn't from depression and alcoholism for me. The relief is from self-centeredness. Ah, man, it's from the system which is self-centered. That system is not you. Yeah. You are in the world but not of the world. The relief is from self-centered, from the bondage of self. Yes? When that relief lands, there's nowhere to get to. So you've also been relieved from needing to be relieved. And so there's no more squirming trying to get out of something that you're not in. There's no more seeing existence in something that doesn't exist. You see? We have to see that. Because I hear about people killing themselves all the time. Alcoholics or not, from depression. Yeah, and it's because the mind is self-centering. It's a self-centered system. And we need to see that shit. Because otherwise, we take a lot of ownership of things that we're not the owner of. Doership of things that we're not doing. Yeah, and then we want out. And we can't get out. Self can't get out of self. If you're identified as the head and you want to get out of the head, it ain't going to happen that way. Yeah, so what happens? Then I want to kill myself because it's seemingly the only way to get out of the idea that we're not in. You know? An idea is being presented, and because all of our belief goes into that idea, it feels like we're in something that we're not in. And I hope it lands, because it's like, for me, that's like the pinnacle of where the relief is. That's the exact nature of the wrong, the identification. Otherwise, we spend our lives trying to get out or morph this self thing. But you can't catch it because self is already morphing. It's changing all the time. Yeah. Individuality is changing all the time. You don't have to like take it from me if you look at your own experience, you see the head just friggin' changing constantly. Trying to catch it. It's like, look at who it arises to, you know? And stick on that point. Because otherwise you're just chasing the wind, man. Trying to fix like oh my gosh. I don't know, trying to fix what doesn't need to be fixed or fixed what's not even a thing in the first place. So I feel it's really important to look at that, to see how self-centered the head is, and to inquire who does it arise to? Who am I in this equation? Is there something there? Is there something there that it's arising to? Or maybe it's yet arising to itself, which is yet another thought or an idea, another movement.